Hey guys, this is Coach Keita Bussey with 180 Firearms Training, Mike Seifert and Jim Kuzak. Today we are going to talk about adaptive shooting. Welcome to the 180 Firearms Training Podcast. So Jim, welcome to the podcast. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, it's good to see you guys. My name is Jim Kuzak, and currently I am a brand ambassador for Glock as well as an adaptive shooter, currently shooting in USPSA and IDPA. I am a medically retired police officer. I had 20 years on the job until I was shot in the line of duty, which left me paralyzed from the waist down, so I'm in a wheelchair.
Stand by.
All right. So you took the Smart Move class in Florida a couple of years ago. You want to tell us a little bit about that, how that went?
So I had met Keita before, I think about 2 or 3 times. She was already the coach for Joe Draghi and Karina Draghi down here at Florida, and they were shooting USPSA. And I says, hey, I'd like to really get to go to one of Keita's classes. And fortunately, she was having one here at the OK Corral. So I said, you know what? I got to see how I can learn to move a little better in the wheelchair. And I tell you what, once I spent that day with you there, I didn't realize all the different things that even somebody not having any experience in the chair being from yourself, to me being in the chair and seeing everything you saw right off the get-go that I would have never even thought to do to gain those times.
So the interesting thing is I come from a nursing background, so I would teach people how to use a wheelchair for the first time after an injury.
Sure.
And I understand the body mechanics and things like that, and how your body reacts to injuries, like if you have spasms in your legs and things like that can affect your shooting. So coming from that background, I think I can see things that other coaches might not pick up on just because they haven't been around people in wheelchairs extensively the way that I have.
Do you remember that at Double Ego when you were trying to teach me that technique, and then you were like, put your shoulders up, and then you're like, oh, you can't do that technique.
Yeah.
So Keita,
I realized you had
look
a
at your body
shoulder
and tell you like, well, the way your shoulder is positioned inside your shoulder, it's all messed up, and there's no way you're gonna be able to do that. So we could do a different technique. So she's good that way too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you can't hide your injuries from me.
No. So Jim, how long ago were you injured in the line of duty? Were you shooting USPSA and IDPA before that happened, and then you had to kind of get used to the chair, or is it something that you came into when you started in the wheelchair and then you found USPSA?
I had shot IPSC type around the area of Western Pennsylvania, and it was with USPSA, the guys that were running matches around the area. And I shot it from the standpoint of proficiency as law enforcement officer. So I shot with my duty gear. My cousin's a police officer as well, and he is now the commander of a SWAT team. So we wanted to be as proficient as we could. So that's where we started getting into that game, I guess you could say. I didn't go back to it until probably about 2 to 3 years after I was shot, and I was shot April 4th, 2011. So it's been a little bit of time, but that's where I started now looking at it from a competitive standpoint and enjoying shooting again, which I didn't know if I was going to ever be able to go back to. So that's why the first 2 or 3 years was more or less my rehab time, but then it was more of a time to get over the lasting effects of the mental aspect of getting shot and learning how to be paralyzed in a wheelchair to then get into the shooting sports again, which I had been involved in shooting my entire life since I was 8 years old.
Right. So what things did you pick up that day that we worked together that you hadn't thought of before?
Mostly what we got to learn, or what you put into my head, was consolidating shooting positions for me, reloading techniques for me, and basically positioning myself with the chair as I would arrive at an array, position the chair for the next array. Instead of thinking just where I have to be to shoot this array, I have to be thinking one ahead so that I don't have to turn the chair all the way from the right to the left to move.
Set up to get out.
Yes.
So
So-
at that time, your wheelchair was set up where you had to move it using two hands, which
Yeah.
means you had to holster the gun each time you had to move the chair and then draw the gun again for each position.
Yes.
So what did we do to make that faster using that chair?
Using that chair was starting off was the reload. So instead of making a static reload, so I'd finish it not moving the chair, I would drop the magazine, reload, then reholster. So what we did with you was, instead of doing that, let's move as much as we can, drop the magazine, holster, so that the next movement as I come into the next array was magazine into the firearm, on target, and firing.
And the other thing I had you do was hold, when you grab your next magazine, hold it between your fingers like a tack reload.
That's right.
That makes your fingers available to move the chair with the magazine in hand, ready to go when you arrive. So you're not going through the whole step of drawing the magazine out of the pouch. Also, when you get there, it's already in your hand, ready to go.
Yes, that's the one thing I forgot about the time with that. Having that mag in my hand, I've adopted that when I had the manual chair. A lot of times I'd have to kind of gauge where and if that was going to be the proper move, only because it depends on what type of ground I'm on, how wet my hand is going to be, how dirt filled my hand is going to be. And that's the other issue with me. When I had to reholster and grab the gun, each time I'm moving, I'm picking more stuff up. When we were shooting in Florida, it's a lot of sand. But when you get any type of rain, it turns into sandy mud, paste, and whatever you want to call it. It's in your hand and everything else. Good that I shoot a Glock. That doesn't usually bother anything with it.
Right.
However, we know with the high-end firearms everyone else shoots, that's not going to probably work as much. But for me, it does work.
I got a question for you. So like I don't want to sound ignorant. I just don't know. Is there like rules for the chair, for like where your holster could be, for like the differences between USPSA, IDPA? Like, is there certain things that you have to abide by? Like, I don't even know if I've ever seen
There are some vague or ambiguous rules. What started with USPSA is I've really had no question or issues. Most of the match directors that I've shot have either known or heard of me and have an idea where I am. I like to be within the spirit of the game as much as I can be with my feet. And we'll talk about the red shoes and how that kind of comes into play. I don't just go flying over a fault line to just get a better position. I go over a fault line because I can't lean out as far as some people standing on your legs and lean around a corner. So I have to have the chair at most point, maybe one wheel or at least the front wheels over the fault line. And then I have enough core strength where I can do that lean. What I've learned now with the new chair is I can lean a little bit further depending on the position of where the chair is. Holsters, they allow for the holster to be positioned anywhere. I haven't had any issues with that. Certain times I had shot with the holster on my belt. Most of the time I shoot right now is a mount that's made by comp tack that mounts to the bar of my chair that's right next to my right knee.
That's what I was wondering about. I was wondering about more like equipment positions, like, you know, your mags, like, do they have to come from your belt still, or can you put them on the chair, you know, stuff like that?
None of the associations, IDPA or USPSA, have really questioned me too bad on that. My mags I still keep on my belt. It's, for me, that having them on the belt is something I've trained since I've been in law enforcement. So my immediate hand placement and movement from my left to grab a magazine is second nature to me. So keeping them on the belt has helped me with that as well. Other than that, the shoes. So I always used to laugh at the people. They're like, well, how do you deal with the fault lines and everything? I said, well, they're a pain in my ass. One, because I have to get over them with my chair. And two, they're always where I don't want them to be. I said, and if it was for me, you guys have all these Solomons and you got to worry about your foot placement. I said, yeah, we'll see one of these days. So the people I shoot with on a regular basis took that as, oh, this is going to be a good joke. So I shot the one match we had and they said, hey, we got something for you. Everybody's standing around. I'm like, this does not feel good. Come over with a shoe box for me and I open it up and it is a bright red pair of Solomons. I said, oh, okay. Funny guys. So I wear them everywhere I go. So there are absolutely no foot faults. You can see where my feet are and it's the brightest thing on me. So, but to answer the question, I do my best at keeping either my feet over inside the fault lines or only like one wheel or the half the side of the chair off that side. So
only in USPSA, man. You know, no mercy for anybody.
Not at all.
So Jim, how much time on average after consolidating positions, setting up to get out, switching to the 50-50 reload, all the things we worked on, about how much time did you take off your stages?
With the manual chair?
Yes.
We had, I mean, literally that first day after you and I tried about 4 or 5 times running a stage, we had it down to I dropped 11 seconds.
And then you shot
seconds.
a match.
11 seconds on how long of a stage? So like 11 out of 30?
24 rounds.
Yeah.
Jeez, that's a lot of time.
Yeah, because I was averaging, you know, people were running through those. Let's say if it was a long field course, you know, they might run a 17, maybe an average guy shooting a 20. Well, that would take me close to 50 seconds to a minute. So now dropping that much time, I've noticed now in the matches that, well, even before that, I'm jumping up 15, 20 spots to shooters that are able-bodied. So that's
got to feel awesome.
Yeah.
And that's really my goal and my passion in working with adaptive shooters is to get rid of that margin, because it doesn't need to be there. You guys are so adaptive and you do this in your everyday life, things that we take for granted, that you have to come up with some other way of doing things, but you can still do it just as well as, if not better than the rest of us, which means that margin doesn't need to be there.
Have you ever competed against another person in a wheelchair or another person like that? That's got to be great competition for you. You're like, finally, I have somebody that I can try to dominate.
We finally have. And what really gave me the idea to get back into this the way I did was Trevor Backo. If you haven't heard of Trevor initially where I found him, shot for Smith & Wesson as a wheelchair shooter. And he had been an Army pilot for the Blackhawks, and that's how he got injured in a crash. So that gave me the idea. I'm like, you know what? I've carried Glock my entire life. Let's see what we can get accomplished here. And kind of like the rest was history. So then I finally got to shoot against Trevor. He came up with an idea, what he called the Adaptive Defensive Shooting Summit, that he put together with help from Ruger, who he now shoots for, and all the people that he knew in the shooting community. So now we've got 3 years in the past already for the Adaptive Shooting Summit, where we had instructors teaching people in wheelchairs that had never shot from their wheelchairs or wanted to. And we shot IDPA style courses up at the Sig Sauer Academy. So yeah, that was the first time that seeing other guys shooting in wheelchairs and how much fun they were having. And I knew how much fun I'd been having. But so yeah, it was fun finally shooting with people where I'm like, okay, hey, I thought I was a little bit better than this, and now I need to up that game a little more.
It's awesome.
So tell us about the new chair. I'm so excited about this.
So the new chair, this also came about as a result of Trevor Backham. Shooting in Sig Sauer is in Epping, New Hampshire. Where the Ibot is made is Manchester, New Hampshire, which is barely an hour away. They made what's called the Ibot out of Mobius Mobility, and the inventor of the Segway is the inventor of this.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, so the wheelchair operates off of gyroscopic ability. So when it balances and when I go in 4-wheel drive and all that stuff, that's what it does. All I got to do is move the joystick and it can do just about anything else. I can raise my height from about 3 feet to 5 feet tall in that mode. And then it has a balance mode where it literally stands up on just 2 wheels where I'm back to 6 foot tall.
So does
That
that
is
allow you
awesome.
then to shoot through ports where before you weren't able to?
Yes.
Yeah, we gotta cut in a picture of this wheelchair or something. Jim, you gotta send
We'll
her
do
a
it.
big video or something so we
Sure.
can see what
I'm
we're
gonna-
talking about. That
I'm
sounds
going to
cool.
send it to Keita, and she'll be able to add it in on on that there. I don't even know how to do that on Zoom right now, but
Yeah.
all you got to do is punch it in. Ibot and Mobius Mobility, and there's videos everywhere for them.
So where is this summit held every year, and when is it? I mean, that's something that we could promote on here also, is that, you know, for
Sure.
people that are not sure how to get into this or where, I mean, if you're running something, that sounds great. Maybe they just don't
They
know.
can either just go onto Facebook and type in ADSS, and that's the Adaptive Defensive Shooting Summit. It's been at, and probably will be at again, the 6 Hour Academy. That just seems to be where Trevor got the first place to accept it, and we had the indoor ranges, and it's usually been around September or October of every year. I don't think he has the dates yet set for this year, for 2022, but unfortunately I missed the 2021 for medical reasons, but that's the fun of being in a wheelchair. But the Ibot, yeah, the great thing about that is, being a power chair now, my movement, I made sure that the joystick was on the left so that I would have control of my firearm on the right. And moving that fast, I've literally already now dropped 30 seconds off my times.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead, Keita.
do you ever operate the joystick with a mag in hand ready for your reload?
See,
That's coming.
smart.
Putting it all together is going to be what is going to take me my time, because I just got the Ibot in June. I didn't really start shooting with it until October. So I've only got a couple matches under my belt, but I do some of our local, 4-stage matches as much as I can to get to the point where, okay, you're going to be road loading at the next stage, and you're going to have to move as well. So have the mag in hand. I don't have that yet. I'm getting it in my mental preparation, because again, with not holstering, I have to watch where I'm turning the chair in going to the next array. I've already found myself where I have to, like, entering a hallway. Sometimes when we'll do, let's say, a field course that has a hallway that you have to either enter or start in, backing out is slower than turning around and coming out.
Mhm.
So that's where I have to watch the positioning. And just as on the cover of your book, with putting the firearm either over your shoulder or pointed down range, I just keep it beside the chair pointed backwards as I'm going up range. And that has worked well. Again, it's a mental thing to put all these things into what I gotta do into what I got to do on the stage, as well as the stage plan. So like we discussed before, your stage plan is going to be, where is your movement flow taking you from left to right or right to left. Well, with me, it's going to be, where is the best position for this chair to make one straight movement, not doing a lot of turning and a lot of backing up, because those are the slow points. Backing up and turning are my two slow points I found with the chair. So I'm trying to make it so that either way I shoot, the chair is just going left to right, right to left, instead of trying to go forward and backwards. So when the consolidation of those positions is where that's going to come into play.
And we did test this and found that actually turning the chair all the way around and moving forward is faster than backing up
Yes.
in most situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You got to bump the speed up on the reverse, You gotta
So
Yeah.
so with the old chair,
Mhm.
you would, in order to sort of shoot on the move or coast, you would kind of have to figure out, okay, if I push the wheels this hard, I should land about here facing this position. That's where it will coast to,
Yes.
so that you can kind of shoot on the move a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And now with this chair, you can just be running the joystick. Do you shoot on the move strong hand only at all while operating it?
I have started to. The difference with that is I've been shooting carry optics. So trying to find the dot has been a lot harder with just a strong hand. but it's been working. So even if I don't have the dot, as long as I know I have my generalized, eyes on the target, firearm to that target, I'm getting some of the shots where it's just that hand-eye coordination. So it's the intuitive shooting of knowing your firearm and everything that way. But even with that, when I have the speed up on the Ibot, I know that when I let go of the joystick, I've got probably about a 2-foot forward motion yet. So I can still be indexed on a target, going towards it, and let go of the joystick and still be moving and engaging already is where I know my stop point will be.
So do you group targets differently? Because if you're shooting on the move, you have to be basically shooting strong hand only for the most part.
Yes.
So do you group the targets where, let's say there's an array with a couple of close targets and maybe a far target, take that far target from somewhere else and group it that way so that you can shoot the closer ones on the move?
Yes. What I'll do is, if I'm not forced into a position, you know what I mean? If they're not forcing anybody into a position, whether you or me, what I can do is I'll like to see where my start point is. If I can get the first array and maybe let's go to the far right of a course, and maybe I can get that far target that I will not have to go into a port or into an open area where there's a forward fault line, so that when I'm moving and I come to that array again, I'm already shooting knowing I had that target in the far corner. I've already got it. So now instead of having 4 in that array, I may have only 3, where then I can already be in the position to, let's say, go into it, shoot 2 targets, and then before I'm even done, I'm already moving towards the next array. So what I've found so far is, as long as I'm not forced into it, it's benefiting me. But if it's a forced, then there's no reason to shoot it at, let's say, 20 yards where I can shoot it at 10.
Yeah. So for most people, excuse me, for most people, we don't want to shoot a whole bunch of targets from one spot because that's a time sink.
Yes.
But for you, that can actually be beneficial, shooting as many targets from one spot as you possibly can. And we talked about shooting from a lean, strong hand only so that you can get more targets without having to move the chair. Do you want to talk about that a little?
Yes. And with the new chair, it's been a lot better because it is more stable. So if I lean all the way out with just my support hand,
your leans look way better.
Yeah, I could literally grab the side of this chair and lean so far out, and the chair is not going to fall over. Whereas my manual chair, I've only got a certain point that I can go over, that it will go over. But with this, I can really get into those and come around. And I just did it with transitioning to my support hand, because otherwise I was literally going to have to turn the chair perpendicular just to get between the 2 openings of the wall to then reach around a target that was literally up against the wall. So in this case, I just transferred from my right hand, took my hand off the joystick to the left hand, reached around the wall, got my hits, came back out and was moving. All in just one fluid motion.
Yeah, so adding those leans and switching to strong hand or weak hand makes more targets available to you without having to move the chair.
Yes. Yes. And that's where, like I said, just now in the few months that I've been using the Ibot, the difference is from a stage plan from the other chair. So all those new variables have now come into, and that's what I'm pushing for for this year, is to be using the Ibot at every match, everything I can do, even at my practice matches, so that that's where it's second nature.
Do you guys like reach out to each other and talk about different ways that you found to use the chair effectively? Like, do you reach out to, I forgot what his name was with the ADSS.
Trevor Backham?
Yeah, like, hey, I was shooting a match today and this happened, and if you do this with the chair, this works a lot better. Do you guys like help each other out that way, trying to like do testing for each other?
Honestly, I haven't as much, and I would like to with Trevor. He's in Texas. Not that if Zoom doesn't work or phone doesn't work. I've seen him shoot more 3 guns and the Bianchi Cup, whereas I've been shooting a lot of heavy movement, with the USPSA and the IDPA. And honestly, I haven't seen too many other people in a wheelchair going out and doing that, which upsets me because if I can, then so can anybody else that may be in a wheelchair or operating with, loss of limb or something to that degree, because you just have to try it. And in doing that with the ADSS, we've gotten so many people in there now that they're like, I can do this. Even though we only set it up so that it's an IDPA stage that isn't movement based. That's where I think I'm different right now is I'm doing a lot of the, we know USPSA is time and accuracy, as well as IDPA, same thing, time and accuracy. So I've gotten my accuracy to on point where I'm comfortable with that. Now it's accuracy with movement and getting that, because being in, Karyoptics is minor. So my hits count a lot more than, me shooting limited or anything to that degree.
Yeah.
Now, the thing I thought was cool is when we worked together that one day, it was just one day. So you hadn't perfected these techniques yet. They had just been introduced to you.
Yes.
And you weren't doing them all the time. It was just, I'm going to focus on getting this one thing right. And if everything else falls apart, that's fine. Now I'm going to focus on this other thing. And you still took off 11 seconds from your stage without doing it the right way every time, because it had only been one day. You had hours. It's not going to be perfect.
Yeah. And the neatest thing to see was the guys that I commonly shoot with, because I'll shoot, 2 or 3 days a week with, whatever matches I can. The guys were like, what are you doing different? Because your times have already changed and you're shooting much better with where I was with the chair. And now they're even seeing how much I've gained with the Ibot. And they're just like, people just look at me like, it's neat. It's finally neat to see somebody seeing my improvement other than myself.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your sponsors.
That's another thing I've been so fortunate and great. Trust me, if I didn't have the support, of Glock, I wouldn't be doing any of this. I just don't make the money that we all have a problem with getting into our loves of passion and sport. Of course, mine have to be expensive, cars and guns. So, we'll go with both. But Glock is the one that has taken care of me for the longest. I carried a Glock on duty pretty much my entire career. So knowing that that's what I basically let my life be protected by and protecting everybody else, I'm like, this is who I want to shoot with. And in doing so, I've met so many other people. I got to meet you. And then, of course, got to meet Brian Connolly from Hunter's HD Gold. Not going to just say this because he's supporting me. Let me tell you about those glasses. It's amazing the differences of how shooting with a glass is the change while you're shooting to the sun, to the overcast, to your dot. It's just amazing. And I can't thank Brian enough. So Brian helped me out with a lot of that stuff, as well as one of the first shots I did was on the West Coast for the West Coast Steel Challenge back in 2017. And there I met up with Len from Katanica. And Katanica is a clothing, I don't want to call it tactical because it's not for that. It's basically American-made clothing, pants, shirts, backpacks for hardcore shooters, hiking and everything. So he takes care of me, getting me shorts, getting me shirts, all that stuff. And that's just from a guy that I met once. Wow. Len takes care of me. We keep in touch throughout the years. I had left my first year, I didn't know how much ammo I could take on planes, and now I'm in California and dealing with guns. So I had left like 500 bullets with Len. I'm like, Len, I don't know what to do with this, and this is what I hadn't shot. So the inexperience got me to meet him. So then pushing me throughout this whole, what I want to say, my recent shooting career. Let's see, who else? Why does this always do this to me?
Have you ever met on the Glock team? Like Ashley and Shane and all those guys?
What's that? I didn't miss that, Mike.
I said, have you met like Ashley and Shane and all the other guys on the Glock team?
Oh yeah. And you know what? I basically thank Michelle the most because I happened to meet Michelle because her family had prior lived and been in Western Pennsylvania. Her father was a police officer in a department close to where I worked. So in talking with her and getting an idea of like, hey, what do I got to do to get into this with the world of Glock and everything? And she gave me some ideas. She's like, you know, just keep shooting, put your name out there, make sure people see you and everything like that. And yeah, and I think it was right just when Ashley got picked up by Glock, where they said, hey, you know, can we offer you this opportunity? And I said, can you? I said, I will gladly jump on this opportunity and represent you the best I can from what I do and what you've done for me in my police career and going forward with this. Who else do I got helping me out all the time? I mean, between family and everybody that supported me doing this, I couldn't do it. I mean, just no way. And it's only because of my sponsors like, you know, Katanica, Glock, and all these guys. And I know I'm going to forget so many just because you asked. So I'm going to have to keep thinking about.
Well, if you think of any, just chime in.
I know that was probably the proudest day of my shooting career since I started, was when I got to actually officially be sponsored by Da Vinci.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's kind of what I've been working for. Everybody that starts shooting, you know, they all see the guys with the shirts and they want to be sponsored. And yeah, so I thought that was probably one of the coolest days. So
yeah. I've been just so fortunate with, you know, the people that want to support me and do these kind of things that I'm just thankful. And most of it comes from me meeting people in the USPSA and IDPA. I've not had difficulties anywhere shooting. Difficulties in respect to, I've already got difficulties on getting around. But when it comes to them helping me, nothing. No problems whatsoever. Everybody's been more than helpful in doing so.
Now, another challenge most people have being in a wheelchair, if you've been paralyzed, you know, most people don't know this, but you have these involuntary leg spasms. Not everybody has them, but most people who have been paralyzed do have these leg spasms where your legs just kind of start jumping around all by themselves.
Yep.
So for the rest of us shooters, we'll have something like a strong wind that's sort of blowing your gun around, or if you're shooting on the move and kind of bouncing around a little bit, basically what you're doing is when your sights cross over the spot you want to hit on the target, you engage it. But if you're on a really tough target, that's not going to work. You're just going to have to kind of sit and wait until it stops. You want to talk about that?
Yes, most of my spasms right now are controlled by medications. So I take baclofen and Lyrica, and those would kind of keep them at bay. Now, after I've been sitting for a while, mostly, you know, once I get to about half a day after lunch, you're not getting a lot of circulation to your legs and not a lot of movement. Now, I have movement that I can do. I can move my right leg, but I can't really feel anything on it. Can't move my left leg, but I can feel everything on it as in hypersensitivity. So that's the other things. So sometimes it'll just start what they call Clonus, which is the spasming of the muscles, because involuntarily my muscles aren't reaching the brain. So the brain's telling them to do something, it doesn't get to them because I'm paralyzed, and the legs want to do something, it doesn't get to the brain. So it actually looks like I'm working double bass drums on a drum kit. My legs will just start tapping, knees up and down. So imagine you sitting there like at a desk and tapping your legs and knees up and down while you're holding forward, trying to, you know, keep that front sight or that dot still. Yeah, that happens a lot.
Usually it probably happens on like a no-shoot target, right?
Absolutely.
That's how it works.
So, just remember when we were kids and it says, follow the bouncing ball on the sentence, and it goes like that. Well, then that's what you're going to do with the dot. Okay, there's cardboard, pull the trigger. You know, it's something I've had to work around. Lately, it hasn't been much of a problem. I think that maybe because it is the Ibot and I'm not getting bounced around as much as I used to in the other chair. But inevitably, it comes when I don't need it to.
Now with the Ibot, you can recline the chair, correct?
Yeah, I can tilt it back a little bit better, which takes a little bit more of that the pressure of sitting all day.
So-
letting
You can elevate your legs?
not the
Not
legs so
really?
much, but a tilt gives me a little bit of pressure relief in doing
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you have the Clonus, basically your muscles are contracting, trying to pump that blood back up to your heart and your head and get it to stop pooling so much in your legs.
yeah.
But if you can tilt the chair back and get some relief from that, that can help minimize it a little bit.
Yeah, and it has, and that's the good thing about this Ibot. I'm learning so much more the more I use it. I don't think a lot of people that have been fortunate enough to get into an Ibot use it the way I do. I'm probably a little rougher on it, but here we go back to sponsors. I got to give it to this. American Mobility Project is the foundation that gifted me the chair, and I only got on their radar because of Trevor Backham, who was gifted his chair, I think either by American Mobility Projects or the VA, either one. But that's how he met them. And American Mobility Projects goes out to try and literally help those in need, first responders, military, and right now they got a bunch of even younger kids that need this type of mobility device because it's not cheap. The iBots now in the second generation are probably right around $35,000.
Wow.
So the chair is, is as expensive as a car. So I am beyond humbled and grateful that I've had the ability to get the iBot. Right now, I think we're probably only about 75 to 80 iBot second generation chairs in the world.
Wow.
And Mobius is producing them as fast as they can to get them to people, obviously, when the funds were there. So the foundations, though, have been doing a great job of getting us in these chairs.
Yeah, if they ever do a third generation, it would be really awesome if they included a reclining, legs elevated position
Yeah,
for when you're off in between stages.
sure. And that would be, I mean, the difference with the iBot compared to, let's say, the power chairs that quadriplegics and stuff may use, or even some paras. The iBot, like I said, is based off all that gyroscopic usages of like the Segway. So the base is where all the weight is and does different things. You can have just about any type of seating solution above that base. So that's the good thing. So I think in reiterations that they're going to make with this, they'll probably have that added on to it, because I think as they learn who they're putting in the chairs, because also I forgot to mention this chair climbs stairs.
That's so cool. I've
Yeah.
seen videos of that.
Yeah, so it'll climb stairs, which the world isn't completely accessible. So if you need to, this will do it, and it'll take you up the stairs.
What does that do? It has like the triangle wheel on it that does that, and then you kind of goes one at a time on the way up.
Well, it doesn't have triangles. What it does is it has, let's say the base has on either side 4 wheels, but both those wheels are on a single pivot point, and so that can motion going like it's wheel front, wheel back, center point, and it does this. So when I back up the stairs, it literally, when I lean back, will rotate that front wheel all the way up onto the step, and then rotate it again up onto the next step, and
That's
rotate
awesome.
up on the next step.
So you can actually shoot the positions that have the stairs in a stage.
Yeah, but here's the problem, that it's not going to be time conducive.
Right.
That's the problem. You get to run
It
up the
takes a long
steps.
time.
For
You
me,
can't
I
run
got
up
to
the steps.
stop, put it in the mode to get up the steps. It's a cool thing to have for the usage of the chair, and
Right.
not so much for shooting.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but and I adapted the mount for my chair already. They have pads to hold your knees in that mount on the chair. So I just took one of those apart on the right side, and where it mounts on the chair, I moved it forward. And the mount that CompTac uses for the holster literally had the same distance of hole placement for the screws for the clamps for my other chair. So I just took
that's
them off,
crazy.
two screws in there, and boom, the holster's perfect. Yeah.
So with your old chair, when there was a port, there
Mhm.
was no way for you to get up and see through it and shoot through it. So you had to move your chair to the side of the wall to even be able to see the targets and engage them.
Yes, or
And now,
a lot of times what we used to do with that is they'd be, okay, shoot through the wall. Just because sometimes you couldn't shoot from a side. You know, sometimes they box in an area and the only way to get it is from that port. So at that point in time, we would already, usually the match director would say, all right, Jim, just shoot through the wall and you just try and get.
How did you feel about that? Did you not like that? Did you want to just shoot it like everybody else did? Or did
That's the thing with me. I don't do anything special for me. I'm not going to ask for a lot. If I ask you for something, it's because I know I just can't do it safely, or it's just not conducive, and it's a waste of my time because it's going to take me so long to get to that point. Yeah. So now it pretty much though, it's pretty much humorous now with people that I've shot enough in IDPA and USPSA, because, you know, they know how I am and they know when I'm joking about, oh, is it a foot fault, or you get a PE for this one, or what do you, why does he get to step over the line, you know? And that's the fun about it, because I'm not anything other than another shooter with everybody.
Love it.
so when you say shoot through the wall, are you talking about the walls that have the netting on them?
Yeah, like
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, not a blind wall,
Right.
just, you know, a netted wall, because there's just no other option for that. Or I've had the ones where it's, okay, you need to prone. Sure, I can throw my butt out of that wheelchair and prone on the ground real
That was
easy.
the last target. Yeah.
Yeah, if that's my last target, I'll do that. But getting back into the chair is just not time conducive. But I try to do everything I can, you know.
Have you ever done that?
Yes,
I love it.
IDPA, a lot of guys won't give me a PE if I can't do something that somebody else can. And they have that in their rules. They're like, you know, we might have some older guys that have bad knees. If they can't kneel down to do it and they got to shoot from else, they get a 3-second penalty. And I'm like, well, why are you penalizing me? I'm like, I really physically can't do a lot of this stuff. Not that I don't choose to, because my knees hurt. Like, sorry, you get the 3 seconds. So if I think they're going to give me it because I can't do it, oh, I'll do it. So I've shot.
Love that.
I've got on a stage where they've had a bed with a nightstand, and I've gotten on that. I just did that at one of the IDPA shoots. I've been in the cars and shot. I've shot through the cars at times and gotten out. I shot from a jet ski, shot from inside a boat. And then on last year's IDPA Florida Championships, I shot from a toilet.
So you're actually self-transferring to and from the wheelchair on some of these stages.
Yes. And I did it just because I don't want that penalty.
I love
Now,
it.
it might even take me over what the 3-second penalty would have been. It would have been better for me to take
It's
it.
the principle.
Right.
Yeah, no.
Right.
You told me I can't. Oh, I'll do it.
Right.
I love it.
Because the one that got me mad is I shot Space Coast IDPA, and they had a stage where you were shooting sitting on a bicycle. And they moved the bicycle and sat me right there. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, am I getting a PE for this? They're like, well, yeah, unfortunately, yes. I'm like, well, why? They said, well, you didn't get on the bicycle. I said, you didn't give me the opportunity.
Right.
I said, for that PE, I'll get you to throw my chunky ass up onto that bike, and you'll just have to hand me my gun because I don't have a holster. They're like, well, no. And then I had a guy on my squad almost get tossed from the match because he was so mad that they gave me that PE
Right.
for not being able to shoot from the bike.
Oh, that would have been me. That would have been
Yeah.
me.
So the guys are usually pretty good. Sometimes, you know, you'll get an SO on IDPA that are, you know, wired tight. And
Have you ever thought of having a rig with a holster on it in case a situation like that comes up?
I can easily, yeah, because the belt that I'm running for IDPA is just a 511 thicker belt with, you know, mag pouch for 2 mag pouches. So I can easily throw a holster onto one. So that is a good thought. I never thought about just wearing the holster
You
anyway.
could use a leg holster too if you wanted. Like if you could strap it
Yeah.
up high weight. Yeah, because you're a former law enforcement. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be cool to just have the holster on there just in case there is a stage like that
That's a good
where you
thought.
can't draw from the wheelchair.
Yeah, I never even thought about that. That is good. Good. Yeah, because it does. It limits me where that is. And sometimes I've gotten out of the chair and the SO will hold the holster with the gun in it for me. But I have video of some of these because this year when I shot that lying position in the bed, you got to sit with your feet up, either lying down or seated. So I sat holding my legs so they wouldn't touch the ground, and then I reached in the drawer. But when I got to shoot the drop turner, I leaned too far and I started falling over. So I just stayed falling and fired off the shot, but didn't get my second shot, and just ended up lying on the bed half cocked with my gun. He's still playing. I got video.
So
of
that's
that.
like the equivalent of us shooting falling out of position.
Right.
Yes.
Love it.
Yeah. So it's I've been in some situations where it's been fun and do things. So yeah, it's I like to make sure it's fun. And most of the guys down in IDPA, they're like, hey, just let him do what he's gonna do. He's safe. Just, mind you, I'm still held to all the rules. I've been DQ'd. I've been DQ'd because of equipment. That was my fault. I was DQ'd. What I disagreed with was a 180 violation after the stage, which I disagreed with. But at that point, you know how that goes.
So
Yeah,
I know
you're
a
not
lot of
winning that,
people
man.
are curious. You want
Okay.
to tell us your story?
Sure. We'll do the short version. The short version is this. I got called with my two partners on duty one day for a disturbance at about 10:45 at night at a duplex. And the neighbors were calling saying something's not right. There's a disturbance going on in the house. So we arrived, and it being an April, Pennsylvania, cold rain kind of day. And we get out, and my partner shows up, and then my other partner shows up. So it's me. I have just I'm out with the handgun. My other partner has an AR, and the other partner is just a handgun. So we went up to the house knowing we only have a front door, back door. And I went to the back, John went to the front, and Matt gave us cover with the AR. I went to the back door, and they slammed the door just as I got up to it. And then I went back to my guys and said, I made contact. Let's come back around here. Well, the door was on a small deck. So it had about 4 steps going up the deck and then a door. So I didn't really have anywhere to go on that deck, but I had my firearm out trying to get some type of contact inside. What I didn't know is my other partner made contact at the front door and knew that the guy that answered the door, that things weren't right. What we didn't know was 2 guys had gone to this house for the specific reason of robbing the drug dealer that lived there of his drugs and money. But who also lived there was his wife and kids. So that's what made this particularly different, in the respect that we didn't know any of this. I knew who lived at the house and knew he was a dealer, but that doesn't make a difference. So
hold on. So the guy that answered the front door was the dealer, and you said your partners could tell that he was not right. Something was wrong.
It wasn't the dealer. It was one of the suspects, and John didn't know that either because they shut the door in his face. So what we didn't know is that they had been at the house. The guy let them in because they claimed that they were the FBI at 10:45 at night, which was ridiculous. So we let him in. They take everybody into the basement. They pistol whip the father, beat him, and now we're trying to get them to give him the money and the drugs. So they grab one of the kids and stick a gun in the kid's mouth and say, we're just going to kill your 8-year-old right here. So then she is taken upstairs with one of the suspects, and he gets her all the way up to an upstairs bedroom and begins to start his raping of her. Pulls her pants down, is kissing all over her. And that's when we actually got there. And he looked out the window and saw us and wasn't able to rape her. So at that point, he took her downstairs and started getting his partner to come up. What are they going to do? They know that we've been to the front door and the back door, and they're not getting out. So they said, well, we didn't know this. They said, we're going to shoot our way out. Well, I was between them and freedom. So when I got to the back door, what I didn't know is they had anticipated somebody being at that door. So when I walked up there, bladed with my gun out, just as I got in front of that door, which was a white steel door, kind of like what's behind me. When I turned around, when I looked at that door and I come up to it, the door opened in and to the right, and all I saw was white door, then it was a black void. The next thing I saw was a muzzle flash. And that first shot, what I didn't realize was the first shot literally traveled underneath my hand, on my gun hand on my right side, went into my mid forearm. The bullet traveled down the length of my forearm and stopped lodging in my elbow. Well, that took my gun from me. So I'm standing there getting shot at, wondering why I'm not shooting back. And I had no idea that I didn't have my gun with me or on me at that time. So that was shot number one. Shots 2 and 3 went across the front of my vest and took out my microphone off my vest. They found it 15 feet out into the yard. My vest stopped those 2 bullets, but then the 4th bullet struck my vest right to the left of my nipple area on that left side. But the vest didn't stop the bullet because it was an inch and 3/8.
Transfer shot.
Yeah, it was from the edge of the vest in only an inch and 3/8. And they tell you in the NIJ standards for vest testing, anything from 2 inches and less from the edge of a vest cannot be, it doesn't retain the properties of stopping the bullet because it can't dissipate all that force at an edge like that. So the bullet went through, which turned out to be a 38 caliber, through the vest into my chest, hit a rib, changed its direction, went now downward through my left lung, destroying it, and across my T11 vertebrae and lodged in my low back right there. There was some type of damage to the spinal column. We don't know because the only surgery we did was to save my life, which was the bleeding of the left lung. So they did a thoracotomy and cut me from my mid chest all the way down to my armpit on the left side. The trauma surgeon went in there and said it was just scooping out what was lung and all the blood loss that I had to repair that. So what they said is a 3-wedge resection on my left lung, saved what they could, stopped the bleeding, and then closed me up. And I've never had any surgery on my back because it didn't
So the
need
bullet
it.
is still there.
Yeah, so I have fragments coming across the spinal column and then the mass of the bullet in the muscle. So I think that carries on a lot of some of the pain issues I have is probably because of that. But I'm just not real comfortable with someone going in there and picking out all the pieces in my spine. So
Are they worried about any of that migrating?
not so much, but I do have a pain that's on my left flank at my waist that is movement based. Anytime I start making big movements with my core, it just is a sharp, agonizing pain and a spasm. And I just have to stop what I'm doing, put some pressure to it, and fight my way through it.
So it's probably pushing on a nerve.
Yeah. So when I was at the door that day, the first shot hit the arm, the 2 come across the vest. When the 4th one went in, that immediately paralyzed me, and I was from a standing position to a falling position. 5th bullet went through my left armpit. As I was falling, I hit the ground. My head hits the spindles of the deck, so that sends me for a loop. With me sitting there on the deck and my back up against it, the suspect came out, and what I thought he was going to just step over me and finish me. Thankfully, he was running and ran over me out into the yard where my partners gave chase. Well, I couldn't breathe, couldn't get a breath to breathe, but everything I could get in my power, I just let out and yelled, "I'm hit." Well, as my partners had been chasing the guys, Matt spins around with his AR, not knowing who's making this sound, sees me on the deck and just levels off. But thank God he had the flashlight and saw that it was me. It was hard to see it was me because it's raining, it's dark, and I'm wearing black BDUs because we were in more of a tumultuous department, so it was more conducive. And Matt came back with John. Matt's only about 5'9", probably about 200 pounds. He was slung with an AR, vest, all your duty gear on. He pulled me from the porch, put me over his shoulder, and humped me out to the front while John gave cover. And the things you remember is very weird. I remember as he's running us out front of my face, bouncing off his ass because it's just, lugged over his shoulder. So Matt said that when we got out to the front and down a house or two, he placed me on the ground. I said, "You dropped me on the ground on my head," which was the second time my head took a hit. He's like, "I don't want to hear it." He goes, "I got you out of there anyway." So the funny thing was, I didn't know this. I'm kind of loopy. He says when he put me down and he knelt down, the barrel of his AR went right into the ground, mud caked in the barrel. And so he said I had to worry about that while he was now tearing my clothes off because he was an EMT as well to get to see what was going to, kind of treat the wound. I didn't feel any pain until he pulled my vest off and grabbed that wound. And that was pain. And I could tell how bad it was because I could really feel how much blood I was losing through that wound. I was close to probably checking out. They were going to fly me, but it was raining so bad that the life flight wouldn't fly. So they took me by ambulance, which was a 17-minute trip to the trauma center.
That must have been excruciating.
It was different. I remember them putting me on the cot and, you know, all the craziness.
Jostling.
Yeah, I could hear officers coming. I could hear other cars coming. I could hear all the sirens. I get in the ambulance and I'm still telling him I can't breathe. And he knows that my left lung has collapsed. Now thinking that my right lung is collapsing, they put the needle through my chest to counteract the pressure to get the air out of the area around the lungs. And I could breathe a little bit. But going to the hospital, we had a car pull out in front of the ambulance. So when he avoided that, that knocked the paramedic on top of me, my leg off the cot, pulled one of my IVs out. So they had to then put IOs into my legs, where they drilled straight into the bone to put the IVs in. And then I remember getting to the hospital and pulling me out and talking to the trauma surgeon. And then I remember everything going white. And I'm like, oh, does that mean I'm going up? Or is it just saying, hey, we're going to go down and see what happens? Then I woke up probably about 8 hours later, intubated and alive. And then that afternoon, I woke up extubated. And that's when, you know, you see your parents and you see your fiance at the time, and you see, you know, everything going on to see where your life is now. At that point, I was being kept in the burn unit, locked unit, because they didn't know who shot me. We had never caught them. So I'm still a risk being at the hospital if they're going to purposely
come
kill
after
me.
you.
So I was in the burn unit, and let me tell you something. I thought I was in some pain, but when you're in the middle of the night listening to the poor people around you in an ICU that have been burned, crying in pain, you've learned something. And it's
interesting. It's interesting you say that, given your situation, you know.
Yeah,
and situation yourself. You know, my uncle actually had been burned when he was younger. He used to be a chef, and he got burned on the entire right half of his body. And my mother tells me stories about him screaming in the hospital when they were cleaning his wounds. But
yeah, it's ungodly to hear the screams from people that are burned. And I was in that unit for 10 days, and then I was in rehab for another 37 days. So for just over a month, I was in the hospital. So that's kind of what happened. I mean, we got one suspect in about 2 weeks and another one in about 6 months. And then we had a trial in a year, the next year. And oddly enough, one was completely acquitted and the other was convicted of everything except the shooting. Yeah.
Something wrong with the system, you know?
Juries, that's what's wrong.
Now, did they at least roll you on your side when you said you couldn't breathe? So your functioning lung was high and the lung with the bleeding was low?
Yeah, they were taking care of everything with, like I said, first, you know, getting that needle in the chest. And then it was a whole lot of, let's see what else. Because I had no idea I had the wound on the right. So they were moving me around everywhere. As for rolling me up on the side, I'm not sure. I was just happy to be in an ambulance. So it was...
That's crazy, man. That's a heavy story right there.
It was different. You know, I tell people I've been fortunate enough to meet some other officers that have been shot. I was also, one of the things I got to do in my life, a friend that I met did a documentary called Heroes Behind the Badge. And the first one we met in viewing it, the producer is a former law enforcement officer. So then when he did the second series, which was Heroes Behind the Badge, Sacrifice and Survival, it's officers that had been killed in line of duty and officers that were injured, the stories he did. So I was one of 5 stories he did in the second series. And that was intense for me, going through everything and being filmed and telling the story. But to see the other officers, one officer, Brady, was shot 9 times. He was out in Moab, Utah, shot out in the middle of nowhere out there 9 times. Literally,
Oh,
one
man.
bullet stopped up against his spine. One bullet went into his heart, and his heart actually pushed the bullet back out because it was in the muscle, and it really pushed it out and resealed its own hole.
Oh my
Brady,
goodness.
yeah, Brady is what I call a badass. Also, one of the officers in Fort
I was
Worth,
just thinking the same thing about you, man. You know, that's kind of what I was
Right.
John out of Fort Worth, in his story, he was a motorcycle cop at 60 years old and went to go after this suspect, and they went into an auto body yard. And when they went to open his truck door, he opened it up, and this guy was on the floor and started firing at John. Hit John in the groin, chest, and when he put his hand up, it blew off one of his fingers on his left hand, and then he was able to draw and shoot and drop the suspect. But one of the shots, John was shot 7 times, one in the eye, lost his eye, lost his finger, and then shot in the groin, and he almost bled out. So yeah, I was in a group of some pretty badass cops.
Wow.
I mean, I think me and Kita, you know, can both say thank you to you and all the other police officers out there that do what they do. You know, I mean, we just heard about the one recently in New York. You know, that was on the news. I just heard about it, and I mean, it's sad. You know, that you guys are going out there to do your job, and that kind of stuff can happen to you.
Yeah, the last 1.5 to 2 years has been difficult for all of us, I think, with the pandemic. But I think law enforcement, we've been beaten down pretty good, and it's not fun.
The lack of appreciation with defunding the police is horrendous.
And unfortunately, Keita, you're right in the trenches of that right now, unfortunately, with Minnesota,
Minneapolis.
Wisconsin. It's just unfortunately, you've had the incidences up there that are happening that are just literally putting
insane. It's insane. I think that's the best word to describe it. It's insane.
It's showing us what the civilians, I will say, are capable of. And it's also showing us the capabilities of a police officer that are good, and unfortunately, the levels of the worst police officers. And that's just what hurts, man. It really does.
The lack of gratitude is astounding. So once a year, I put on an event for police officers where they can come to my local range and get training for free, just on basic pistol fundamentals, moving around with a gun, shooting on the move, that sort of thing. So
That's
if
awesome.
you want to sign up for that, email me 180firearmstraining@gmail.com. It does take place in Wisconsin.
Okay.
But anyone is welcome if you're a police officer, a veteran, or a first responder.
Yeah. Hey, Jim, have you gone back to like your department that you used to work at, and do you like work on training officers now? Like, have you brought USPSA, IDPA into the department at all, or?
The officer that does all of our firearms training in the department, he's doing a real good job with guys right now. It's no longer just stand there and shoot a target, 25 yards.
Right.
A lot of it now is movement based, get off the X, move left and right. If you're going to reload, you better be moving while you're reloading. You make sure you're getting to cover, if at minimum, get some concealment, and he's doing a lot of that, which is what we need to do, because state of Pennsylvania, all you're required to do to keep your certification is a 60-round course.
Yeah.
Once a year.
Once a year.
Qualification.
Yeah.
And it's not realistic at all. I mean, I know a few cops that do that. It's like, I feel like you guys should be working more bill drills and stuff. I mean, if you have to actually pull your gun out, you're going to be dumping a few rounds. So like, if you're just shooting 1 yard or 1 round, 25 yards, it's not really telling you anything, and you're not under pressure at all. And
it comes down to this: defund the police department. We didn't have enough funds prior to that.
Right.
My department literally would only give me 2 boxes of ammo a year for practice. 2 boxes. So that's 100 rounds.
See, I've always thought about that. To me, that's weird from like a liability point of view from the department. Like, don't you think you'd want your officers shooting more so that if they had to pull their gun out, it's not something that's, I mean, I shot 100 rounds last year in 6 months leading up to my first major, and I felt extremely rusty coming out to my first major. So like, how, as a police officer, if that, if your life's going to come down to it, you got to use that firearm. How is it fair that you only get 100 rounds to practice with? I mean, that's like you get 11 rounds a month.
The greatest thing that I've seen right now that's benefiting police department is the body worn camera. We're literally seeing what happens in a split second shooting situation where either the officers had to draw from holster or has been out of the holster, and you do see the shortcomings, because we're now inducing adrenaline jump. We're introducing, what is the backstop? Where is, what type of firearm are you using against? What are they using? Is it a person using a knife? Everything is coming into play all at once, and we're now getting to see the good and the bad of that. And a lot of it is you're going to see the inefficiency of training for law enforcement.
And you can have a great AAR and not only have your AAR with your unit, but you can share that with other police officers as well. This is what we saw. This is how we can change this. This is how
Sure.
we can do better. This is what we need.
Yes, and that's where I think the body-worn cameras came out more as a result of liability, to say, hey, what are law enforcement officers doing, good or bad? But we're learning so much more in shooting situations as to, what did the officer have to do? Did the officer mandatorily have to pull that gun that time, or was it an absolute need that time? And it's not that, I won't say it's keeping us accountable, because the officers I know were accountable prior to there being a video. It's just, civilians that think we weren't
Right.
accountable before.
Now, I think there are a lot of instructors out there who do offer free training for police and SWAT and things like that.
Sure.
I am one of them. I know Mike Glover does a lot of that as well. And I think at the very least, instructors are offering discounts.
Sure. And that's what's needed. I can tell you that my hobbies when I was in the police department mirrored what my job was. So my hobbies were firearms. My hobbies were training. So even if my department couldn't provide training for me, I was in other police organizations that they offered money to help you go to training. And that's where I went to all my firearms training. If I wasn't, doing martial arts on my free time, it was, either working out, martial arts, back to the cars, or guns. So it was something that would benefit me in my job at some point in time. But I'm the unusual one. There's not many officers that are like that. Most officers get out of the uniform, it's everything otherwise, which is good.
Right.
You do need something to vent. You need something to take your mind off of doing that job. For me, it was firearms, and other toys. But the firearms I looked as, this is what I carry every day that's going to save my life.
Yeah,
That's
tell
how
us
I looked
about
at it.
that. Tell us about your concealed carry. This is interesting. Your everyday carry.
My everyday carry now is the new fanny pack from Galco, that you have a pull string, and when you open the top zipper, the gun presents itself and you draw from the holster right there. And I'm learning to use that one. That's what hides the best with me, because most people just look at me and they're like, oh, there's a guy in a wheelchair. They're like, oh, poor him, or whatever they may think. Oh, he's got a fanny pack on. It just sits there in front. They don't know or even think that, oh, that guy's carrying a gun. Well, guess what? I'm kind of the guy that needs it, because I'm not going to be able to run away as fast as you people are, scurrying away from the threat. So I figure at this point, I'm usually ready to go for that.
It's like the bear in the woods thing, Jim. You don't got to be faster than the guy. You just got to be faster than the guy with you. Roll away.
And that's usually my goal, is to trip up somebody around me so I can get away. But, no, I do. I always carried when I was a police officer, and I always carry now. And it's just a matter of personal preference. But with what we've seen in the world, it's the weak. The people out there doing bad are the ones looking for the weak. It's never, I'm going to go do the guy that's, well, I don't know if I can take him. No, it's always the weak. It's now the elderly, and then we've seen it's the Asian hate. We've seen it's anything to that degree that people are unfortunately out there and minding their own business, and they're getting attacked.
Yep.
Right. I think being a woman as well, I'm seen as the weak, so it's important
Absolutely.
for me to carry.
I don't know about you, Keita. I'm sure people know you. I'd be a little scared of you.
I will tell you a story for the concealed carry. Right after
I was hoping you would.
Yeah. Right after the trial for the guys one of the ones that shot me, we were in city of Pittsburgh, and I had the following Monday. We were done with the trial on Thursday. Monday, we had to go to family court for something. So me and Chris, we were parked underneath the jail. Well, excuse me, where the Allegheny County Jail is. And that's an old courthouse. So we go in, we leave, and they're walking the street to go to another courthouse. And on that street, they have the bus shelters. So it's middle of summer. We go by the bus shelter and there's 3 people sitting there. And I noticed a large black man sitting in the corner. And as I go by, I had a police polo shirt on that said Clairton Police in my name. He goes, "Hey man, Clairton." I said, "Yeah, how you doing? It's good to see you out here." I didn't know who he was. I'm just, hey, somebody's acknowledging me. My story had been all over TV this whole summer. But then as we're moving forward, Chris is behind me. She goes, "That guy's starting to follow us." What do you mean he's following us? And as he comes around that bus shelter, he goes, "Oh yeah, you think you're better than me?" I'm like, hey, I'm just doing good, man. He goes, "What do you think I'm going to do when I kick your ass?" He goes, "I'm going to take you out of that chair and kick your ass." I said, "Chris, just keep moving forward." And he keeps coming. "What are you going to do when I knock you out of that chair?" So now we're getting to the corner of the street. And I said to Chris, I said, "When we go into the street, just get in front of me because I'm going to turn around and I have to address this." This was the day I first put my Glock 27 40 caliber in my pocket because I could. I wasn't going into the courthouse where I needed to relinquish my weapon. I was in the city. Literally, when I got into the middle of the street, I heard him on the corner of the street corner, and I spun around, pulled it out of my pocket, and had my one hand on the left wheel. And as I got to my stomach area to do the draw, he turned around and walked back. It was that close. And I'm thinking afterwards, I'm like, one, he's about 6'5", probably I said about 270. So now I can see the headlines. White police officer in a wheelchair shoots a black man for no reason. And I'm like, wait a minute, no reason? 6'5", 270, I'm in the wheelchair, but it was just right after the trial too. So thank God that went that way. But then when we came back, my chief says to me, he goes, I just called him and said, "This is what happened." He goes, "You got to make a report." I'm still thinking like a police officer. I'm like, oh, I solved the problem, no big deal. So I made the report and they took me inside the sheriff's office. He said, "Well, what did he look like?" And I just happened to look on there's a file folder sitting there on the table. On it was this picture. I said, "That's him right there."
No way.
They're like, "What do you mean that's him?" I said, "That's the guy right there." What had happened is he's out there waiting at the bus stop because he's going into court at 1:45 for his hearing. What I didn't understand was he was there for mental health court. He was not stable and he was going in there for his hearing. So when he went in for his hearing, after he did that to me, he walked into the courtroom, flipped the judge off, looked at the next deputy and punched the deputy. Took 5 deputies and 2 tasers to subdue him in the courtroom. And when I told them he did this to me first, they're like, "Oh my God." He ended up getting convicted for 4 years.
Wow.
4 years. And that happened literally right after the trial I was involved in for my shooting. So yeah.
That had to be a little sketchy, you know, having a point right out in the street. You're not, it's not something you're used to, especially when you're not, you know, you weren't a police officer.
Yeah, I'm like,
He's so lucky he turned around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm not, I mean, I literally was, I was only in the chair a year. I hadn't been shooting enough. I haven't shot at all yet, but I just felt something. I just put the gun in my pocket and thank God I had, because that was probably one of the other closest shooting, possible shootings I was involved in.
Well, I love it that even after all of this and all of this trauma that you went through, you still came back to shooting as your hobby, something you love, something you enjoy. Is that empowering for you?
I didn't realize what it was going to be. I started off first shooting a shotgun and shooting a sporting clays. And once I did that, after 3 years of being injured, I'm like, okay, they're not bothering me. It doesn't bother me. I'm like, okay, I don't, what I got through was in the first 6 months after the shooting, I went to a lot of counseling because I was having a lot of the flashbacks. I was having a lot of issues with any loud noise was dropping me right back into that feeling of, hey, I'm getting shot at. Once I got over that, I think it just, for me, I was able to just move on. Okay, you're in a wheelchair, who cares? You got shot, who cares? You've got to have fun. You've got to show people what life is. You've been given a second opportunity. Why not go back to the passion I had? I mean, it just seemed that's what I needed to do. And once I started shooting and I could see that I could get better and shoot better than I thought I could, yeah, I knew I was back at it.
Caught the bug. Yeah.
Mhm.
If there's one thing that comes out of this podcast, I hope that we can inspire a few people that are in wheelchairs who don't know if they can shoot to come shoot.
Yeah, me
Yeah,
too.
just try it. Yeah, when you're telling your story, I can see the moments where it takes you right back there. Like when you're talking about the white door, the black void, I can see that you're almost reliving it when you tell the story in certain moments.
And thankfully, due to the Victims of Violent Crime Center where I went through for my counseling, she's the counselor that showed me how to do that. She's like, look, you're going to tell your story. She goes, but you don't have to be in the story telling it anymore. Because the first few times I was telling it, I didn't even notice it. She goes, stop right now. And I said, why? She goes, look at what you're doing. I said, what? I was wrenching my hands so bad and so tightly that they were turning white. She said, look at your pants. You were rubbing your hands in your thighs when you were talking to me about this. She goes, we have to talk about this way so that when you tell it in the future, you're not having it happen to you again. It's just a story. So once I did that and got the story out, having told it how many, hundreds of times, it doesn't have an effect on me. I've woken up in the middle of the night, maybe 2 or 3 times screaming over the 11 years now, just getting thrown back into it. But yeah, I've just been fortunate. I don't know what gave me that motivation or drive to just say, okay, it happened and I don't worry about it. I don't know what it is. I just know that wake up every day, I try and smile and try and enjoy everybody and everything I do.
Well, I think you're super inspirational. I know I'm inspired, and all these excuses that we make, and here you are in a wheelchair getting it done, no excuses. Like, man, very motivating.
Thanks. It's nice to be able to impart something on everyone. And that's when I try and tell people is, look, it will pass. Something's going to pass. Whatever your hardest day is, it's going to pass. And then you deal with it, some way, somehow. There's just too much good stuff out there.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there anything else you didn't cover that you wanted to talk about?
I got some. Yeah. Well, what matches are you going to do this year? You got anything planned out for 2022? Like, where are you planning on being?
Not just yet. And the only reason I haven't gotten that far is the wife, she's dealing with her mother has some health issues, so we're getting that ironed out. So hopefully spring, I'm going to get something on the radar and get a few of the shoots out there. Yeah, I'll definitely be out there this year. I'm going to be, I don't know if I'm going to make the 2-gun. I wanted to start shooting 2-gun, but we'll just stick with the Glock for right now. I'm enjoying that too much.
Well, if you can, I'm shooting the Western PA sectional. It's a USPSA match, but I actually.
Where is that?
I could look it up for you. Yeah, I'll let you know. If you go on Practice Score, you can see it. But I actually just asked the match director to see if we can get you in there.
Well, absolutely, because I shot that, I think 3 years ago.
Yeah, they didn't have it last year. They had it 2 years ago. Yeah, for sure.
Because it actually was at my home range.
Really?
Clarendon.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I shot that one.
It is. I will tell you. It is going to be at Molenkamp, presented by Molenkamp. Hold on.
Western PA, huh?
It's going to be in Bulgar, so it's going to be in Bulgar, PA.
Okay.
King Road.
Yeah, that's not bad.
It's in July. So.
End-to-end PA is a 5-hour drive. It's no big deal. So hopefully I'll get into one of those shoots. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to see you out there, man. I'd love to shoot with you, You
awesome. You will.
Yeah. So yeah, looking forward to that one. And thank you for coming on and sharing your story. I mean, that was
I'm glad you guys
one of my favorite podcasts that we've done so far. So
thanks.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.